Content creation without losing your voice. There's a version of using AI for your content that really works. You finish more, you publish more consistently, and you stop staring at a blank screen at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, wondering how to start the caption for a post that should have gone out 2 days ago. And there's a version that feels a bit hollow. The content looks fine and it reads fine, but it doesn't really sound like you, or it doesn't really feel like you. And somewhere between the prompt and the publish button, the unique thing that made people follow you in the first place got smoothed out and polished away. And today we're going to talk about how to have the first version and avoid the second. Welcome back to Omnia Mea Compass. I'm Susan Platt, and this is season 3, Build Smart with AI. And we are recording towards the end of May 2026. And I have someone very special with me today. Libby O'Loghlin is an Australian-Swiss author, content strategist, podcaster, and the person the internet knows as the content coach. She's been building things in the narrative space for decades, like across many countries, formats, and media landscapes that have changed completely around her more than once. And if anyone understands that what it means to maintain a distinctive voice while adapting to new tools, it is Libby. And she's also my co-host from the Swiss Biz Builder season 2 of this very podcast, and my very good friend. Welcome back, Libby.
Thank you, Susan. It's good to be back on the pod and talking about a topic that's very pressing for a lot of us, and themes that I've been wrangling alongside you. So I've got to say the topic's a lot of fun, and I personally have had quite a wild ride with it. So
Yeah, I think we all have, and it's something we're still all figuring out, and that's why we're here today.
yes.
And I want to start with a question I generally do not have a definite answer for. But I think the honest answer really depends enormously on who you are and how you work. And the question is, and I want to expand on this, should solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, writers, and small business owners be using AI for their content? And I will tell you what I think. And then I would like to hear what you think, because I suspect we will have slightly different angle on this. So, that work for you?
It works for me.
All right. So my answer is yes. You know that. We should be using it, but with a very specific caveat. And the caveat is that AI should change how long things take to produce and not what those things sound like. So the moment your content sounds like everybody else and it sounds like somebody other than you, even if it's still very capable and an articulate someone, but I think you have lost the thing that the content was supposed to build, which is trust. And trust is a huge issue. And I want to get into that in a little bit, but I'd like to hear your take on this.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Your question is about solopreneurs and business owners and using AI. And I would in general actually agree with what you said, that it depends who you are and what your business is. So, for example, our professional lives, yours and mine, have looked very different over the years. But the thing we both do in the AI context is get organized. You know, you organize your processes, you organize your back end, you organize your own thinking, especially. You keep your prompts organized and your library of reference documents. And if you don't already have a way of keeping the clutter out of your own head, then I'd say now is a very good time to start with that. And all of those things can kind of allow us to reclaim our time and keep our unique voice. And as you've mentioned, the most useful way to orient yourself to AI is to kind of think of AI as a teammate who can do stuff that you very specifically tell it to. And it's not what I would call a true collaborator, even though that is a word that people use, because I think true collaboration is where you actually have an equal stake in the outcome. And clearly an AI can't really have that. So in general, my high level advice is I've got 3. One is ask first if the thing that you want done is actually a job for AI. That sometimes people don't go back that far in their thinking. And one of the reasons for this is a personal thing, that I know that there's a very real planetary cost and resources impact for each task. So we don't really know the exact environmental impact at the moment because AI companies are not transparent. But one figure I saw recently when I was at an AI hackathon hosted by Leap during the Climate Week Zurich this year, 2026, is that one chat GPT request uses 2.9 watt hours of electricity, which is basically 10 times the amount of one standard Google search.
Okay.
So when you add that all up, clearly there's going to be an impact. So that's why my first one is ask, hey, is this something that I really need the AI to do? Or am I just kind of in the groove of just going, hey, what do you think about this? So the second one is to put some limits on how many times you're going to go in and course correct. And you talk about this as well, that when you're working on a task, one of the skills is related to being kind of present and intentional with the things that you're doing, and to be able to really jump out of it when you think, wow, this thing is really drifting in the wrong direction and I'm spending an awful lot of time trying to course correct.
Abort, right? Yeah. Abort. Yes, it's hard because you get caught in the loop and you want it to do. I don't know if this has happened to you before. One time that the AI has been able to do something and you were completely smitten with the result and think this is so effing cool. And then the next day you do the same thing and it's just an eternal spiral and you just go, no, and you want to start writing in all caps.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, why is it not doing that anymore? Right? Yeah.
It just does.
So I think it's an important skill to know when to abort.
So the third one would be just to take time to define your voices and create resources for your AI so that it knows which of your different voices to use to generate content or edit it, as the case may be, depending on the purpose of the content, of course. So
very sound advice. And so we're going to cover some of this in today's episode. As usual, we have 3 waypoints. In waypoint 1, we're going to name like the problem precisely. What does it mean to lose your voice? And why does it matter more for entrepreneurs than for larger corporations and for larger brands? And in waypoint 2, we will get into the specific ways each of us uses AI in our own content workflows and what we hand off and what we keep and where that line is. And in waypoint 3, we will give some practical frameworks for using AI in your content without losing that voice and without losing what makes your content yours. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so where should we start?
We should start at waypoint 1, what losing your voice means and why it matters. So I want to start by being precise about this because I think the conversation about AI and voice can become quite vague quite quickly. And people say, keep your voice. And what they mean by that is often very murky. You're the specialist on voice.
Yeah, so what do you think of when we talk about voice then?
So I think your voice in content is not just your word choices or your tone. It is the sum of how you think and what you care about and what you notice, what you find funny or frustrating or worth saying out loud. And it is the particular angle from which you approach a topic. So it is the things you would never say as much as the things you always say. And it's accumulated over years of being you in your specific context with your specific audience.
So when you think about losing that voice, what worries you about that?
So what I think when I say losing your voice, it don't mean your content becomes bad. And I think it can still be really well structured and grammatically clean and entirely on brand aesthetically, while still sounding like no one in particular. And the problem with sounding like no one in particular is that your audience, even if they cannot name what has changed, begin to feel less connected. engagement drops, like not dramatically, I'd say, but it just slowly leaks away because the connection is what really gets things going and it just sort of erodes.
Mm.
And so for a large brand, voice can be managed structurally. And there are brand guidelines, there's content teams and editorial sign-off process. But for a solopreneur, this does not exist. You are the brand. And there is no document that captures your voice well enough to replicate it without you, which means the stakes of losing it are higher and the recovery is slower. But I want to go a level deeper than that because I think the word we're really talking about is not voice, it is trust. And I want to take a few minutes to expand on this important topic later on.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe it might be helpful to give some examples of this kind of so-called generic voice that we're talking about. And what I see with AI-generated texts. And I might help people to spot it. I think probably a lot of us are already spotting it.
Yes,
but
we are.
I think it's good to just put it out there anyway. And we all see YouTube blogs, newsletters that you sort of think, yeah, something's a bit funny here. And I think you can really tell when AI is in its blue, so to speak. So common ones are sort of, it's not this or this, but it is this.
Mm-hmm.
And that turnaround is really common with not B, but C. And then there's the what I call the drama. It's you're not making headway, you're changing the game.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like really taking it next level drama. And then there's the rule of threes, of course, the triad rhythm, which comes out like 3 examples or even challenges that are either going to be there to illustrate a point or else they're about to get completely flamed by the next example. And they appear in kind of short, sequential, punchy sentences. And it is actually a legitimate writing technique that creates a sense of completeness and it makes things easier to remember. It has a rhythm to it. We've been doing it for centuries. So it is a literary technique, but overused, it becomes tripe.
Yes.
That's my tripe.
And it's everywhere now. I agree.
And then there's the universal authority, which is when no sources at all are cited.
Yeah.
It's that kind of authoritative voice and this and that. But it's like, well, where's the proof of that?
Yeah.
You know. So, and actually, that's kind of a bit of an alluring one because especially if people suffer with underconfidence themselves, it can be really attractive to have that. Oh, I can just say it with a bit of heft and it'll sound authoritative. But yeah. And then there's asking a question. Why not? And I'm here to say that a human wouldn't always write something in a question form. When they're talking, they often just go for the next point that they want to make. And it can be very useful to punctuate, of course, when you're writing, but to overuse that it just becomes a bit, okay, this is sounding a little bit like others. So I'd say not too many people actually talk that way or even construct their written arguments that way. And then there's the dashes issue, the double end dashes with a space on either side or not, which I would say rightly in literary fiction or fiction without spaces either side. And I love them. They are also a bit of a dead giveaway because they can be, again, falling into the drama thing. I would encourage people to not use the single N, the single dash, because that is a hyphen, but sorry, an N dash is a hyphen. But try to just get into the habit of using other punctuation like colons or semicolons, and I love when you're semi. So
yeah, but if I may jump in here, I mean, you and I are both writers, and you have published books out, and this is something that I saw, and that's an immediate giveaway. Like also in the business correspondence, in the captions, suddenly everybody's starting to use M dashes, and it's such a clear indication that it was AI generated. And I think we're at a point where it's actually almost like a little bit of a red flag. At least it is to me. If I see stuff in in popping up in correspondence from people who used to have such a different voice that I was so used to, and now suddenly I'm getting all these in dash, documents. Then I think it's a difficult question because on the one hand, you got to give them credit for wanting to send out something that's very professional. And on the other hand, sometimes I think it's just it's lost its uniqueness. It's not how I know this person would typically behave.
And it's a learning curve, and probably they're also learning.
Yeah,
So.
but it's almost like a visual flag. And for me, if I may, just there's two more words also in all of the captions that I see online. One is quietly, and the other one is actually.
Yeah.
So these are like the three things that pop out of me if I see anything in on Instagram or somewhere else. If that pops up, it's like, hello,
quietly slipping away.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and in terms of stylistically, I think in certain cases an AI will tell you a story from go to woe, like first this, then that, and then the outflow of information just actually loses its texture altogether. If you ask a human what happened today or to tell you a story in their newsletter or so on, they don't say, well, I got up and then I yawned and I picked out a shirt and I tripped over the Lego or whatever. They say, oh my God, you won't believe what I saw on the way to work. And then they'll backtrack and tell you that stuff. There's a bit of a jumping around, and it's a very textured way of telling the story, and they're giving you kind of the emotional space and the processing space to one human to another to process what's being handed over. And sometimes I think that's something to look out for with an AI, that the information is very flat, and you want to really try to engage the reader in a familiar way. And sometimes it's just good to step back and think, well, how would I tell this story? It looks great on the page, the way the AI has done it, but is that the way I would actually approach the story? So that's one thing. So AI usage, like in creative writing, like fiction, is a whole other discussion.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking in a different context now, not least because there seems to be a kind of a moral imperative to keep the creative process technology free, which of course is ridiculous because there is so much creativity in the business environment, and laptops, pens, even language itself are all technologies of sorts, But I mention it here because of those aspects of creation, whether that's for your business or not. They do well to be protected. And I don't mean sort of in a black and white, stay away fashion, not like that at all. I just mean to be aware, to remain very aware of when you want to hold on to the creative process yourself and which parts you're going to outsource. And humans, we're not dummies.
Nope.
We know when something's kind of misaligned or not, there's the word authentic. But relatedly, you were going to talk a bit about trust, where it comes from and why it matters.
So. Yeah, thank you very much. And there's so much there's so much depth to that discussion, I think, and also what you mentioned earlier about seeing these things and people not being dummies. And personally, I can say I'm a little bit oversaturated with all these hooks and everybody, like building the thing without giving you the resolution, and you have to swipe through 10 different slides to get to it. And it's all AI generated. And I think there's a certain point where you get quite tired. I'll say there's like almost an AI fatigue already with some of the content that's out there. I know certainly is for me. And it becomes increasingly more difficult to pick out the stuff that really resonates with you because you're getting lost in a sea of sameness, right?
Yeah. And
so we're coming back to this word and the issue of trust, which is such a huge topic for me on so many levels. And so in the legal and in the professional sense, the word trust has a history that goes back much further than brand strategy or social media content. And in the legal environment that I have been in for the last 15 years or so, it goes back to the Crusades, and when knights left for the Holy Land, sometimes for years, and sometimes never to return, they needed someone to hold their land and their property and their assets in their absence, right? And so, because they could not take that with them. And so they placed it in the hands of someone that they trusted completely with a clear understanding of you are not the owner, but you are the steward. Here we're at the topic of stewardship.
Yeah.
And you hold this on behalf of someone else and you act in their interest, not in your own interest. And that arrangement is often cited as one of the historical roots of the trust structures that later developed in English equity and evolved into modern trust law across many jurisdictions. And I came to this concept through work rather than theory because for a significant part of my career, I worked with ultra high and high net worth individuals and their families and supporting the complex trust structures they use to protect and pass on on generational wealth. I am an affiliate member of STEP, the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, the global professional body for trust and estate professionals. And STEP members operate under a strict ethical code. The core obligation is fiduciary duty. So the highest standard of care that one person can exercise on behalf of another. And it means your interest, so my interests come last. The beneficiary's interest must be treated with the highest level of care and loyalty. And that is not a preference. It's professional and moral obligation. And I've been thinking about what that standard would look like applied to the relationship between an entrepreneur and their audience in the concept of AI, because I think the parallel is closer than it first appears. And when someone follows you and subscribes to your newsletter, shows up for your podcast week after week, they're placing something in your hands. Not land or assets, obviously, but something equally finite and equally personal. Their attention, their time, and their willingness to trust that what you say is genuinely yours. And they are handing you a form of stewardship. So they are the beneficiary in this sense, and you are the trustee. And your obligation, if you take that seriously, is to act in their interest, to give them the real thing, like not a polished AI average version of the real thing, the real thing. And this is why the voice question is not just an aesthetics question in my mind. It is not about whether your captions sound a bit generic. It is about whether you're honoring the trust that your audience places in you every time you show up. A fiduciary does not delegate the core of their duty to a tool, however capable that tool may be. They may use the tool in service of that duty, but the judgment, the care, the responsibility, and the integrity remains theirs. And that is exactly the standard that I hold myself to with AI. And I think it is the right standard for any entrepreneur who takes their relationship with their audience seriously. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No, I just love how you kind of brought those two worlds together, and you can see the direct relationship between them. It's lovely.
Thank you. I just think without trust, you can't build anything worthwhile.
Agreed. And I think it sometimes can take a bit of time to hone that process too. When you're first diving into the tools.
Yes.
Because AI is so good at ironing out blemishes and crinkles and fumbles and so on.
Yeah.
But responsibility for your words is really important. And I always think that language is quite a miraculous kind of fluid cultural technology, if you like, that it kind of allows us to connect with people around us and to collaborate with each other and to actually create wonderful things together. And trust is built with and also is a byproduct of that.
Mhm.
And from the client side, we can say that humans do have a very peculiar and nuanced way of reading a text and inferring from that what the writer's intent is. And our brains really love to connect dots in ways that you just sometimes wouldn't expect. We're like these kind of walking pattern recognition machines. And I know you've talked about pattern recognition before. And we do know immediately if something doesn't fit into our particular micro or even macro context, or the history of our previous interactions. So, like cross-cultural language, or terms that just don't sound right in your business context, or are too formal or too informal for that particular relationship. Or if you're pitching something at a point on the client journey that feels too early or too late even, you know, generic content does actually give me a brain ache. I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Once I've received the information that I've signed up for, and I and many people, I think, tend to unsubscribe if we feel like we're in this endless kind of emoji-laden email funnel. And on the flip side, a cynic might say that actually generic AI content is about as authentic as it gets. Like we said before, when you as a business owner choose to use it, it represents you in the way that it's told to and at the point of your journey that you're up to. And it's not pretending to be something else. It's just a true and accurate reflection of the choices you make, and even the limits of your own understanding. And that's where a lot of us are at the moment.
Yes,
I think, because
indeed.
we just haven't quite worked out how to use it 100%. And, you know, as a business owner who's engaging in marketing, well, marketing is marketing and everybody knows it's a form of persuasion, right? So why try to hide the tools? You could argue that stance. But when you bring human values into the mix, as you've been discussing, if you're someone whose work and offering to the world, if you like, is built on real care and attention to your clients' needs and to their context as well, then the very least you can do, I think, is show them that you've thought about the content you're sending or posting, and that you're willing to do the work to meet them where they're at. So it is work. Even if AI can help us cut down on the time invested, it is still work.
It is work, and it remains work. But I want to stay with trust for one more moment, because we have been talking about voice and about the words you use and whether they are genuinely yours. But I think it applies just as directly to visual presence and to the images you put into the world as a representation of yourself. And often this isn't talked about openly, but I think it needs to be.
Yeah. Tell us more.
That was more well, but I mean, I'm sure as you've seen it as well. And I want to go back to what you said earlier. And I sit in quite often on webinars of my peers. I look what other people are doing and the tools that they're using and they're suggesting for entrepreneurs going out. And I was in a webinar the other day where the person promoting their workshop said, here's my funnel. I have never read a single word about it, you know. And I thought that was atrocious, because even if you feed the information into AI, this person hasn't done the responsible thing to check that the output was okay. And the other tool is we're talking about the visual stuff, where I was in several webinars of people saying, well, you no longer need photographer or spend money or take the time to take, you know, actual pictures, because you can just upload these pictures of yourself, and then the AI creates these versions of yourself. And it exists obviously on a spectrum, right? AI at one end, there's adjusting the brightness of a photo, like you have been doing for years with Photoshop, and correcting the color and tidying a flyaway hair, which with my curls I often do. And I don't think anyone is being deceived by that, you know. And it's the equivalent, like, of wearing you a good jacket for an interview or for a professional headshot. But at the other end of the spectrum is the generating an AI image of yourself that presents a version of your face and your body and your presence that just has never existed. And 10 kilos lighter or a decade younger and with a different bone structure and so on. And I would argue that it is not a photo of you. So it's a fiction present it as a fact. And when your audience meets you in person, they will know. And so the question for entrepreneurs, I think, is like, where's my line? Because I know obviously it's a lot cheaper, right? If you do have a photographer come, you pay money for a shot, for a photo shoot, that can really become expensive quite quickly. So the question is, where's the line, right? Because photoshopping a blemish is not the same as generating a body that is not yours. And the tools now make all of it equally easy, which is exactly why the decision has to be conscious rather than just convenient, I think. So the test I use is simple. Would someone who has only ever seen my online content recognize me when I walk into the room? And am I happy with the version that I see online, even if it has some dark circle under my eyes? So if the answer to either one of those questions is yes, I'm within the boundary of honest representation. But if the answer is no, I have crossed into fiction, and fiction, like a visual fiction, however flattering, is a breach of trust my audience places in me. And to me, it is the visual equivalent of handing them AI generated content and calling it mine.
Well, this it's just such a rich area for discussion. This area, and I could talk about it for at length. But what I'll just add here is just to say that it's a very tricky topic for women, I think.
Yes.
And especially women who want to put themselves online, because especially online culture is very obsessed with youth
Yes.
and looking young and keeping young. And our technologies actually seem to be biased to assist us to do that.
It's true.
I mean, they're not generated to try to make us look older or more mature, are they? Which is kind of upside down as far as I think about it, because for I think 95% of us, it takes literally decades to develop real business acumen and build our portfolios. There are exceptions to this, but from the bulk of people, it takes a long time. And also it often takes a large chunk of time to develop the knowledge and understanding of what it is that you can really pass on to others. And my takeaway is that we're just held to such strange standards, truly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what makes it particularly acute for solopreneurs is that there is often no big media team behind you, right? You don't have a big budget. So a large brand can have highly stylized visual identity that nobody expects to match a real person because nobody is meeting the brand in person.
Yeah.
But when you are the brand, the image of you is as implicit and that's the promise about you. And the more that the image diverges from reality, the more that promise becomes a lie, even a gentle and a well-intended one. So in that sense, I'd say the same standard applies to the creator's voice, applies to the image. So use the tools and use them well and let them serve your communication, but do not let them replace you with a version of you that requires you to manage the gap for the rest of your professional life, right? And that is an exhausting way to build a business. And it is not what your audience came for. They came for you.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I don't think AI generated content is bad. I really don't. Like a lot of it is technically very good. It's also good to remove backgrounds and things like that. It used to be a long time with Photoshop would go around it. Now you can just give it the prompt and it does it normally quite well. The problem is that it is trained on everything, which means it defaults to the average of everything. And it produces content that is competent, clear, familiar, but it does not produce content that is yours unless you give it enough of yourself. That is, it is drawing on your thinking rather than synthesizing everyone else's. So that is the main distinction. And AI as a synthesizer of the general produces generic content. And AI as an amplifier of your specific input produces something that can still sound like you. And the question that we already touched in previous episodes is always, what are you putting in?
Yeah. And it, of course, depends on the content's purpose, and the podcast show notes don't need half as much as you as a sensitive email to a long time client or something.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. So we covered quite a bit of ground and
Yeah.
we've come to the end of the Waypoint 1 and our actionable steps. And this week I want to do something simple, or I would like the listener to do something simple. So go back and read 3 to 5 pieces of your own content that you wrote entirely without AI. Caption a post, email, or a section of a newsletter and read them and note what you notice. The phrasing that is distinctively you, the rhythm, the things you say that someone else would not say. And that is your voice reference. So keep it somewhere you can return to, and we will come back to why it matters later on in Waypoint 3. So we arrive at Waypoint 2, how we each use AI in our own content workflows. And I want this section to be honest and specific rather than aspirational, because I think people hear about AI and content creation and they get a picture that does not really match reality. Either it's an all-in automation, which makes most people uncomfortable, or it's a refusal to use it all in, which, misses an opportunity. So let me tell you exactly how I use it in mine. And then Libby is going to tell you how she uses it in hers. And I suspect they will be a little bit different and some interesting ways. So the things I do not use AI for is first drafts or of anything that carries my thinking. My podcast scripts start with my ideas and my structure and my argument. And similarly, my newsletter starts with something I genuinely want to say. And the core creative and strategic layer always is and remains mine. And if AI starts the process, I can tell, and my audience can tell too, even if they cannot say exactly how. I think it's just like the gut and intuition, and the people who know me know who I am quite well. So the things I do use AI for is research and synthesis, which we covered earlier in an earlier episode. So structural editing, asking AI to look at something I have written and tell me where the logic breaks or where I have repeated myself, if the flow is off, things like that. Caption variations, if I write something that I feel it's really actually a pretty good start, but it just sort of misses something, so I send it back in there. And if I need to find like different angles, also sometimes for different platforms. I use a lot for transcription, turning a recording into a structured graph and then rewrite it substantially if need be. And briefing documents for Maddie, my content producer, so that the handoff between my thinking and her execution is key. And in every one of those uses, AI is handling most of the time the mechanical or the structural layer part. But the thinking, the voice, and the argument, that always stays.
Yeah. So upfront, I think it's important to mention that my AI process for usage is aligned with my way of being and creating and running my business. And that's the only way it might look different, I think, because we are aligned on those basic how to work with an AI basics that you've also outlined in previous episodes. And I'm in a creative field. I've worked with a lot of people with their creative ideas, writers and editors and artists. And I've done a great deal of collaborative work. And even though I am very adept at helping people with their content or high level marketing strategy, my core brand, if you like, seems to be rather human centered. And by that, I mean being able to effectively communicate with and coach the humans who are doing the creating to help them get their unique voice into the world in a way that suits them and their context. So my specific clients aren't coming to me for rigorous kind of orderly universals and processes. They're coming for a kind of long view of how narratives work across platforms and time. They come for a reframing or for lateral thinking, if you like, specific context reading, human pattern recognition, and my intuitive approach to human challenges, which are based on, I guess, life experience as a professional and as a human. So, in that sense, I'm actually not interested in using my personal energy or my spark to create step-heavy business flows and strategies. And I'm very happy to let an AI and other experts do that sort of thinking for me. When I receive an AI output from my ideas, I'm usually stepping back and doing the human thing, seeing the patterns, comparing it to my own mental visual map, because I'm a very visual thinker, of how I think things look or sound. And I'm also looking for the story, and I'm kind of hearing the flow of information. And sometimes I reject it all completely and either start again or just pull the plug and write something myself. And I think that's always going to be the case with the way I approach it. Um, it's something I like to encourage other people to do too, is just, step back and have a crack at something yourself. And,
Yeah.
but in general, like you, I would never send or publish anything client facing or internet facing if I hadn't looked at it and edited it first. Like you, I don't ask AI to generate something based on other people's work or their voice or generic internet stuff. Like you, I generate my own written notes or transcribed thoughts, sources I want to include, and I create my own kind of strategic outline of the main points I want to cover, which is like you, the way you do it. Sometimes it's not strategic for me, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
The AI will sometimes generate an outline, which I will usually change. So it's a bit of flux, but there are a lot of overlaps there, I think, between the way we do things. But I think it could be useful to talk about how to hold on to your voice.
Yes.
Do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please.
So I have my own voices library
Okay.
that I can ask the AI to refer to. And those are fiction voices. And I would not at this point ever use an AI to generate content using for fiction writing purposes. That's just, I think it's a particular kind of art that I just wouldn't use that for. I have prompts for the AI so that it can refer to the voice library and it can offer editorial input. So substantive or copy as a human reader might, but whether I would use that at all is very project specific. There is just some like genres that it doesn't lend itself to. So I write short story, poetry, literary fiction, political thriller, young adult. So some of those I might use it for, but not all of them.
Okay.
And then there's nonfiction. So I have a self-help voice, which is, I call it the self-help voice, but it really is broader than that. And then I have an advisory or informational blog posts voice and marketing voice. I have different names for them, but that's in general the way I segregate. And within the marketing, I specify if I want some content, I specify the type of content, e.g. a book blurb or a one-liner, an outreach email, that sort of thing. And of course, that is exactly what AI does extremely well because it knows marketing speak. It knows how to identify the different types of marketing contents. So
Specifically.
yeah. And just quickly, I don't actually have a mailing list anymore, but I suspect if I did go back to it at any point, I would use AI to help in between the human draft and the human polish. I think I would probably do that sort of thing, like tofu in my writing. So
Okay.
but yeah, right now I'm kind of looking at it more for book marketing tasks as well, which is a more complex area, but those are the general.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what I noticed when I listened to that, and I think this is worth naming for people listening, is that neither of us hands AI the authorship, right? So we hand it tasks. And the tasks we handed are ones that we're either going to take a as a disproportionate amount of time, or ones where our specific voice and judgment are not the primary requirement. And that is the distinction I keep coming back to. So tasks versus authorship. When AI handles tasks, you speed up, but when AI handles authorship, you disappear. Poof, poof.
Yes. And maybe that approach is easier for people whose work, like their workplace and their workflows, etc., is predominantly kind of information or left brain dominant already.
Okay.
But there are ways to hold on to your voice.
Yes. So, as a takeaway and end of this Waypoint 2 and our actionable steps, I'd say map your own content workflow this week. Not what you think it should be, like not the ideal version, but what it is today. And where does the content you produce begin and where does it end? And which parts of that process are genuinely creative and require your voice, and which parts are mechanical or structural or repetitive. And that map is your starting point for working out where AI can help without hollowing anything out. So, Waypoint 3, a practical framework for using AI without losing your voice. And I want to give you a working approach here. So, 3 principles that Libby and I have both landed on from different directions that seem to hold up across different content types and different ways of working. So, the principle 1 is input before output. And the most important thing you can do before you ask AI to help you create anything is to give it the raw material of your thinking first. Not a prompt that says, write me a post about X, but a prompt that says, here's what I think about X, and here's the angle I want to take, and here is something I noticed or experienced that relates to it. Here is who I'm talking to and what I want them to feel or do. And the more specific and personal the input, the less generic the output becomes. And it sounds more like you because you are the source material. And this is the difference between asking AI to think for you and asking it to help you say more clearly what you already think. So one replaces your voice and the other amplifies it. And the principle 2 is review against your reference. So remember the content I asked you to find earlier on in Waypoint 1 in the actionable steps and the pieces you wrote entirely without AI. This is why. Before you publish anything that had significant AI involvement in its production, read it against something you wrote entirely yourself. Not to check grammar or structure, but to check register. Does it sound like the same person? Are the rhythms similar? Would you say this? This is about calibration rather than perfection. Like over time, you will develop a sense of when the AI has drifted away from yourself, and you will know exactly what to rewrite. But in the early stages of building this habit, the comparison is the fastest feedback loop you have. And the principle 3, keeping a voice file. And I don't need an audio recording. I mean, this is the most practical thing that I can offer and also the most underused. And the voice file is a living document where you collect the things that are distinctively you. Phrases you use, right? Words you avoid, opinions you hold that most people in your field do not, and the topics that make you animated, the tone you take when you are writing to your best client. Examples of content you have produced that feel most like you. When you start an AI session for content, paste your voice file in as context, not the whole thing every time, but the relevant parts. Tell the tool, this is how I speak, and these are the things I would never say, and here is an example of what I'm aiming for. And over time, this file becomes your most valuable creative asset because it is the thing that closes the gap between AI as a generic output machine and AI as a tool that genuinely serves your particular way of communicating. So, Libby, what would you say to people who are just starting out and don't have a voice file or a content library yet?
Oh, well, I would say that I think we have much more raw material than you think we do. We have voice notes, we have WhatsApps, all of your communications. Actually, I'm not suggesting that you download every single thing that you've ever written, because that would be a privacy breach in a way. But those are kinds of things that you can draw on elements of those, right?
Yes, and that's very helpful because it is a topic that I do see or I saw in earlier workshops that I see in, and there are all these, the gurus and the experts right now that are saying, oh, you need to clone yourself, and all you have to do is feed this AI all of your earlier things. But quite a few people are starting out and they don't have that, right? They don't have essays online, they don't have a YouTube channel, and they don't have a TED Talk they can link to. But I think this is a really valid piece of advice is how do you build that library, right? So voice notes that you send to yourself when idea lands is important. You can start doing those. It's just you do a little bit at a time, or WhatsApp messages where you explain something to a friend. Obviously, as you say, data protection and anonymize where necessary. The same as like an email that you push back on or something on something or where you choose your words carefully. Because none of that requires a ton of YouTube videos or, a 3-year podcast archive, but it requires paying attention to the things you already say and start collecting them. And those really add up. The little bits add up to that library. The second point I'd make is that people you look at who seem to have it all figured out did not start that way. No. They showed up before they felt ready, and they built the library through showing up.
Yeah.
Which means the answer to the question is not to wait until you have enough. The answer is to start producing content with intention and treat everything you make as both contribution to your audience and a deposit into your voice archive. And one of the most useful exercises I've come across for this, and it predates AI entirely, is an exercise I did as part of a previous workshop, which entailed reaching out to a small number of people who know you really well and asking them to describe your 3 strongest qualities, like what they come to you for and where they see you offering real value to others. And it's not a survey, it's a personal request sent to people you trust and who know you in different contexts.
Yeah. I've actually done that kind of outward mirror exercise myself. I guess it was about 10 years ago when I was doing some coach training, and it was actually quite scary.
It is, right?
I had a massive vulnerability hangover after I sent out the emails, but the responses were actually so thoughtful, and it gave me a lot of courage to start putting my work out there more publicly. So yeah, I can recommend that one.
Yeah, again, it goes back to trust, but I think also the reason it works is that other people see you without your filters. And, you've been editing yourself your entire life. We all do that. And the people around you don't have that filter. And they see the version of you that comes through when you are not performing or second guessing. And what they reflect back is often the raw material of the most distinctive thing about your voice. And so we have, for this episode, put together a worksheet called Your Voice Foundation that walks you through this process. And it has 2 parts. It has the output mirror that you just mentioned, which is the exercise of asking people who know you, and the inward excavation, which is a set of solo prompts to surface what is already there. So the 2 together give you the foundation of a voice file, even if you're starting from scratch. And the link is in the show notes.
And at this point, I would like to add something about not you losing your voice. And it's based on my experience working with hundreds and hundreds of writers at all stages of their life and writing, including working with poetry and prose, alongside people in drug and alcohol recovery in a private clinic. And it's because humans, we don't do so well when we lose our voice or when we feel like we've lost our voice.
Mhm.
And I find writing is such a wonderful way to really reclaim yourself and your sense of identity. So I would want to suggest to pay attention to what I call the 3 C's,
Okay.
and that is connection, consumption, and creation.
Uh-huh.
And basically, what that involves is with consumption, it's sort of like a real life mental hygiene, for want of a better word. So that is keeping the garbage out. For me, that's fairly limited social media or email subscriptions. I'm pretty selective about what I let into my brain these days. And of course, I do love a good action movie and watching Netflix and so on, but I can only take so much of it. Um, and then there's connection, which is the concentric circles, the bigger life questions with selected others and with yourself. So that's the universal questions and your special connections with people that you know and love and yourself. So I would suggest practicing mindfulness or having some kind of practice of grounding yourself and tapping into your own sense of self and the things that inspire you and will help you stay on your specific life path because it's different for everyone. And for me, that's sometimes meditation, sometimes breath work or ice baths. Sometimes it's reading poetry, but I'm rather fluid and seasonal about these things. I don't think we have to be rigid about it. And just whatever you're into, it's good to make it a regular thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the creation aspect, and that is where it's really great to participate in some kind of creative practice that's not for any audience whatsoever. It's just for the love of it. And you might be surprised what pops out and how much stronger your own voice gets because of that process.
Yes. So absolutely. There's a lot of actionable advice from this waypoint. And so the simplest one is to start your voice file this week. So you can open a document and give it a name and add 5 things to it, like one phrase you use often, or one word, or a construction you never use, or one opinion you hold about your field, or one example of content you wrote that feels most like you, and one sentence that describes who you are, that is really working for you. That is your starting point. You can build it over time, but starting is the same. Or alternatively, a good guide is the worksheet that we have put together and that you can download in the show notes on the Omnia Mea website that is listed in the show notes of this episode. So, takeaway and close. We started today with a tension that I think most entrepreneurs who are trying to use AI for content have felt, that the efficiency is real, but the risk to preserving your unique voice is also very low. And navigating between them is not something you can do by following a rule. It requires knowing yourself really well, or well enough to know what is yours and what is not yours. And in Waypoint 1, we named what voice is and what losing it costs, not in terms of aesthetics, but in terms of trust and connection with the audience that you're trying to build. In Waypoint 2, we walk through exactly how Libby and I use AI in our own content workflows and what we hand off and what we keep, and the distinction between handing AI tasks versus handing it authorship. And in Waypoint 3, we gave you 3 principles: input before output, review against the reference, and keeping a voice file. So 3 things you can start this week that will change the quality of what you produce with AI without slowing you down.
Yeah. And, there's one thing I just want to say before we wind up is to remind everyone that all humans are creative and every single one of us, it's the way we're built. And unfortunately, I think having a whole sector with a label slapped on it, like the creative sector, it may have worked against the rest of the working population because I have noticed and I've seen surveys that show that a great deal of us just don't have confidence in our own creativity. And if working with an AI has shown me anything, it's that this is humanity's moment. We are built to create. We're good at collaborating with each other. And we're now able to work with machines to create amazing stuff. So I invite everyone to get brave with your words and trust your own creativity, trust yourself.
Indeed. And thank you so much, Libby, for being part of this journey and for coming back to the podcast this week and then further down the line.
It's a pleasure, Susan, as always.
And so next week, we're already at episode 7 of this season, and we're going to talk about having your eyes open about the risks, the things that can and do go wrong with using AI, and the decisions you need to make consciously rather than by default. And it is not a scare episode. It is a clear-eyed one, and I think that'll be very useful. And until then, take care of your voice. It is the most valuable thing your content has. As always, all that is yours, you always carry with you. See you in the next episode.